In this video, I'm going to be talking about the classic film noir, The Big Heat, which was directed by Fritz Lang. It was released in 1953, and it stars Glenn Ford, Gloria Grahame, Lee Marvin. What a great cast. I will be also discussing why it is one of the most brutal, yet optimistic film noirs ever made. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a film podcast where I explore the many different ways that stories are told on film, and today I'm going to be discussing The Big Heat, which I've seen a few times, and every time I see it, I'm reminded more and more of how brutal it is. For one thing, it really hits you on an emotional level, how brutal it is. It explores suicide, it explores police corruption, it explores very dangerous characters like gangsters who will kill you in the blink of an eye in order for them to get away with what they need to get away with or what they want to get away with, which is part of the story. It really occurs to me that in the early 1950s, even through the 60s, you didn't see too many police officers portrayed in a way which was negative. Here we see the commissioner being one who's corrupt, who is associated with gangsters. You know, what happens is it starts off with a police officer committing suicide. What I find which makes you lean in and curious about it is that when the police officer's wife finds him dead, she doesn't even react. And that right alone, the coldness, what is she up to? Why would this woman, who you assume is his wife, I suppose normally people, you find a loved one dead, you react, you get emotional, you panic, but she's stone cold. And throughout this plot, it's heavy on plot in terms of why this police officer killed himself, how he was connected to mafia. He was someone who was taking bribes, and because he wanted out of their racket, they just kind of knocked him off. Lee Marvin's character is one of the most really darkest and cutthroat film noir characters I've ever seen. For example, the famous scene, Gloria Grahame, who is his girlfriend in this film, once he finds out that she was talking to Glenn Ford, the main character, the police officer, he throws coffee right in her face. To think that, every time I see that, I just wince. To think that someone would, even to see that now in a movie is shocking. In the early 1950s, to throw coffee and burn this beautiful woman's face is just quite revolting, and it really gives you a feeling of discomfort. But it's a remarkable film. We don't necessarily have a femme fatale. We don't have the doomed protagonist. We have a protagonist who is basically a good cop, an honest cop. He sees this suicide as being an open and shut case, and then he discovers little by little that it's not so open and shut. And because he's a good cop, he wants to find out the truth. And as he goes digging away, and the police don't want him to be involved because they know they know it's the mafia who's involved. They work with the mafia, and they want to keep it hush hush as to why this police officer would kill himself. And Glenn Ford's performance is remarkable. To think that he never raises his voice, he never screams, he never gets overly emotional, but he's very serious, and he's very angry as well, but he keeps it so contained, and he doesn't even move in a way. He's so still, and when he's really threatening someone, his voice is so powerful. He pulls the audience in. That's a sign of a really great actor, because it's easier sometimes, not that it's easy to get mad on camera, but in my opinion, it can be easier to do that as opposed to just be dead serious and to be very direct and very bold. And the way in which he pulls the characters into his threats and into what he's going to do about their corruption, and how he is not someone to be messed with, is quite astonishing. I mean, he's an actor that really, in my opinion, is underrated. He's given a remarkable many performances over the years, and this to me is one of his best films. And his wife, played by Marlon Brando's sister, Jocelyn Brando, to see their relationship early on, I think that was essential to see that they had a good marriage, a loving relationship, because ultimately when she is blown up in the car by the mafia, they meant to kill him because he wanted to dig around and why this suicide happened. The way in which, just to think that these people would kill your wife, kill your kid, later on they threatened to kidnap his daughter. I mean, he's in some very scary and anxiety induced situations, but I think it's so great that they made you see that they were in a loving relationship so that the audience really cared. So then ultimately when she dies, your heart goes, of course your heart goes out for the child and for Glenn Ford, but he was so great even in those early scenes. He was loving, he was playful with the daughter, but then to see him be fearless as he has to face, police corruption and the people that he works with. And, it's ambiguous in the sense that because he's such an honest cop, he's not a rookie cop. You don't get he very much knows about the corruption. He very much knows who could be involved. And he even says, Mike Lagana, who's the head gangster, as he starts digging as to the clues that's being fed to him about this suicide. Well, not if everyone, if someone got killed in this town and there's something corrupt going on, it's got to be him. So that tells me as the audience that he's already been involved, but you don't know anything about, not necessarily directly involved, but he certainly knows about it. And the fact that he wasn't a character who, you don't see anything about his police past. So why now? Why is it that, were all his other cases, open and shut? Why is this something he's pursuing now in terms of getting to the truth? You don't know. It's ambiguous. It's not like Serpico, which is a great. This has elements of something like Serpico later, where Frank Serpico was a rookie cop, and as soon you see him becoming a police officer, and he's new to the job, and he sees the corruption, and he says no. And in this, you see that, but you don't see his early career. So why now? I don't know. Maybe he just didn't deal with anything this big, or maybe he turned a blind eye until he couldn't anymore. They don't go into that, but I find that really interesting. The Glenn Ford character. The character that really interests me is Gloria Grahame, because she teases Lee Marvin early on that every time Lagana calls, he's like a servant. He goes anytime if they need him. He's there. He's there in a second. He's sort of like she's playful at the same time, and she's almost portrayed as someone not very bright until, of course, what's so interesting is that she's a lot smarter and courageous than the audience thinks about her. At least that was my point of view, because once Lagana finds out that Lee Marvin's character was very much involved in this, and they have a confrontation in a bar, Fritz Lang cuts to her looking at Glenn Ford's character as if to say, who is this guy? What is he up to? And she wants to go to his apartment and talk to him. And you think, does she want to sleep with him? Is she attracted to him? What does she want from him? And he even asks her, and she doesn't really give him a direct answer. I don't think she necessarily knows, but I think she was comfortable with the money that Lee Marvin was supporting her with. And she has a line, I've been rich and I've been poor, and rich is a lot better. So she's another character. You don't know her past. I imagine that she was someone who went with Lee Marvin because he was wealthy, he was well off, and she turned a blind eye to the fact that he was a criminal. I mean, there's no love between them. He's bossy, he doesn't treat her very well. And she's humoring him about what he does, but I think she actually really hates it. I think ultimately she is disgusted by Lee Marvin, and when she sees a guy like Glenn Ford stand up to him and look at him in the same way, look at him with disgust and hatred, probably is what she felt towards Lee Marvin, but because of, which is a very noir thing, money. Because of the money that she was getting, she was living within the comfort of her life, and enjoying the riches. It sort of reminds me of later on. I don't know if this was a direct influence, but in The Sopranos, Carmela Soprano, Tony Soprano's wife, was similar, that she loved the riches of Tony Soprano, but she hated what he did for money. She felt complicit, she felt guilty, and they really go into that in that show. And this really reminds me of that, and she basically has an opportunity to do something about it and to help Glenn Ford, which she does, and that scene when she comes back and burns Lee Marvin's face to get back at him is, you cheer for her. You're totally on her side, and she's just a tragic noir character, that someone who probably made one too many mistakes, got involved with the wrong people, and ultimately paid for it, even though she wanted to change. She wanted to do something better and good and stop being involved with someone just because of money, because he's evil. He's an evil human being. So there's a lot with the characters that is really appealing and really interesting, really ambiguous, as well as emotional, which is often the case with noirs. Is we have these really rich relationships that have a lot of ambiguity, that only give you so much, and you don't know so much about their past, but they give you enough that you can have these thought-provoking conversations about Glenn Ford's past, about the Gloria Grahame's character's past, because they're not so cut and dry. They're more complex. Their behavior shows contradictions and mystery. Whereas, like even though Lee Marvin is, sensational, he's terrifying. He's a bloodthirsty guy who, if there's any threat of danger to them being caught by the police, he's ready to just rub everybody out. So him and Lagana are very much more cut and dry, even though, again, very good performances. What is interesting about them is that early on, before you get to know more of why they put a bomb in Glenn Ford's car and kill his wife, and they even make a phone call earlier on and threaten him, and he shoots it just at the back of the car. I don't know who one of the characters who calls. They shoot just at the back of his head to say, keep your nose out of it. And I get the impression that the gangsters are terrifying, and they are. But then what you find out is that they're not. They make mistakes, and they're not so bright. So they weren't even supposed to kill. They didn't even want to kill Jocelyn Brando. They wanted to kill Glenn Ford in the car, and they just messed it up. And they were just kind of making mistakes. And there's a great scene between Lagana and Lee Marvin where they fess up to kind of messing things up. It's not these idea we have of these, which they are calculated, but these people are so calculated and street smart and are terrifying, which they are. But then we see them make stupid choices and be dumb and hire the wrong people to kill someone, and hire someone who's not that bright. In the case of the guy who planted the bomb, hired someone to plant the bomb. He's an idiot, that guy. He's portrayed as just some goon. So that was another thing. Even though they're not as rich or complex as, again, like Gloria Grahame or Glenn Ford, it's interesting to see that them make mistakes or not be the brightest people. There's also a couple of times when Glenn Ford confronts Lagana about being involved in the suicide, accusing him of it. He talks about this painting in his office of his mother. And later on, when Lagana and Lee Marvin are talking, the scene starts, Fritz Lang, on the painting and zooms out to talk to the two of them. So what's that about? To me, it's ambiguous, of course, and it's almost as if she's a presence looking down on, and she's seeing everything that her son's up to, because she talks about how my mother was so proud of me, because of all I achieved and all I could do for her. And it's as if, in his case, he's like, my lasting memory of my dead mother. But I think having that painting there and later on zooming out and hearing them talk this horrible conversation that they're having to about how they're gonna kill Glenn Ford and this pickle that they've got themselves into. I think the fact that Fritz Lang zoomed out from a close-up of that painting says that your mother knows that you're actually pure evil. That's what I took from it. Or it can be how sad it is that, your mother died thinking that you're some kind of good son that gave her a great life and became successful, but ultimately it's tragic that as far as what we know about this woman in this painting is that she didn't know anything about what he did for a living, or maybe she did, I don't know, but from what Lagana said, she didn't, and she was just proud of him. And that's sad to think that who is this woman may have been just hated her son for that and turned on him, and maybe it's part of the tragedy. But there's a couple of things that you can take from that. So anyone who's been following my podcast, that I love moments like that I love ambiguity, that I love characters that are not cut and dry, that I love to have these conversations about what a character's past may have been because of the behavior that we're seeing in this film, as I illustrated with Gloria Grahame's character, Glenn Ford's character, and again, just to summarize it up, why is Glenn Ford standing up to these people now? Why not before? He's been a police officer. Why is Gloria Grahame now stopping to do something about the gangsters as well? That's almost a connection that they have in a sense, because they're both complicit in the sense that he's a police officer. He knows that the people he works with are working with gangsters. He's complicit in that sense, because if you know that you're in a corrupt system and you're a part of that system, even though you may be just looking the other way, you're complicit. She is the same way, because ultimately she doesn't like what's happening, but because of what she's getting from Lee Marvin, money, security, what have you, a comfortable life, she's turning a blind eye until they both make choices not to anymore. And so I think that's ultimately positive, and obviously it ends well, not for Gloria Grahame's character, but for Glenn Ford. Because he loses his job, he gets his job back, he gets some kind of promotion, as we can see at the end. And I love the irony of I don't know if that was like a sick joke, because someone in the office in the police station has a coffee pot, and he says, "Keep that coffee hot." And what we saw with coffee throughout the film, I don't know if that was a dark joke on the right, from the writer, or from Fritz Lang, but certainly this is a more brutal film. We see characters experience some things that are just horrendous, but we also see characters change for the better, and we see optimism in the end. We see people break through of these corrupt systems that they're involved in one way or another, and not be complicit anymore and have to pay the price. In the case of Glenn Ford, he loses his wife. His wife dies. In the case of Gloria Grahame, she dies, period. So they both lose a lot, and that's what I like about it so much. It's not just that they don't suffer any kind of consequence for the things in which they were complicit in. They do suffer the consequence, and even though Gloria Grahame dies, she dies for a cause which was ultimately to break out of the corruption that she's involved in and to help Glenn Ford. And Glenn Ford, he gets his job back, and now, is he going to be faced with that corruption again? Of course he is. He's a police officer. Of course there's no part two, but he's learned to stand up for what's right. So it's a rougher story, and there's a lot of brutal scenes, but I think it has a beautiful arc, and it's, in my opinion, just a really fantastic noir. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Like I said, it has thought-provoking story. It has incredible performances from Gloria Grahame to Lee Marvin, Glenn Ford in particular. It has an incredible story, a really dark film noir by Fritz Lang, one of the great noir directors. And you can find it for free on archive.org, which is an internet streaming service, which is absolutely free through a library system. And I will leave the link in the description box below to where you can see that. So check it out there. Thank you so much, folks. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If this is your first time on my channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo Movies at the logo that you will see floating above my head right here to your top left. Click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video or go live. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. I now have a film noir tier, which is a whole section dedicated to film noir. If you become a member, you'll get exclusive access to it and other bonus content on there as well. The link to my Patreon is in the description box below. You know, it's a few dollars a month. Really goes a long way to help us content creators out. So you can check it out there. Thank you so much again, folks, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.